Steve, welcome aboard to the show. So happy to have you on board today.
Well, nice to be here.
I gotta ask you, what is a CRO? I think everybody's familiar with the technical, the CEO. What's the R part of it?
Well, the art part is revenue, and the job of a chief revenue officer is partially sales manager, partially marketing manager. It's really responsible for the function of generating revenue and monetization. So you really touch on sales, you touch on marketing, advertising, really anything product development, anything that drives revenue really falls under the purview of a chief revenue officer.
And since it's including so much from the perspective of the bottom line, if you come into a new company or advising a company, how do you know where to focus? How do you kind of do that gap analysis of where you really need to create those improvements?
Well, I mean, there are certain drivers that every business has that drives profit and drives revenue, right? And so the goal of a chief revenue officer is to first find the low-hanging fruit and then work their way up the proverbial tree. Um, you look at really everything, right? You want to look at your customer retention. You want to look at, again, depending very much on the business, the prospect database. How big is the market? I happen to work under a particular theory, which I call marketing around the edges, where what I look for are all the revenue opportunities that are as a result of the core business, but not necessarily the revenue that the company's currently making. So it's really, there's no one set approach. You want to look at everything and see what are the drivers, what's causing the problem. Sometimes the issue isn't increasing sales. Sometimes the issue is increasing profitability of the existing sales. So there's no one set of things to look at. You're really trying to look at all of it.
Tell me about around the edges. That's new to me. I don't think I've heard that before.
So I got a start really early in the internet. I was one of the co-founders of MP3.com that goes to 99, and before that, I was involved in the internet as early as 1970, 1998. And the internet really changed the way companies do business and the way I mean, the impact I don't really need to talk about that. We all know the impact of the internet. But what it really did from a business perspective is it allowed everything to get, or most things to get commoditized. And the competition became very much not necessarily driven on quality of service, but it really made it a lot easier to drive sales and the impact with price, right? I've got the same service as they have. I can't really compete on quality because we all have about the same quality. So I'll just keep driving the price down to zero. And if you recall, especially in the early days of the internet, free always won, right? Netscape got beat because there were free browsers. I mean, I can give you the long list. So what it really meant is that every business, or virtually every business, got into that cycle of how little can I charge in order to remain competitive? And all of a sudden, their margins get eroded and everybody's eating their lunch. So then what it meant is, and this is where the edges come in, what it meant is that what you have to look at is what else can you add to your revenue stream that can't be marginalized or commoditized because it requires that initial relationship in order to offer that service or that product. The best example of that is actually Amazon. And the reason that I say that is if you looked at Amazon as a pure e-commerce business, not very good, right? The margins are pretty crappy. Their profit, nothing compared to what a Walmart makes on their retail. But by owning the e-commerce platform and by basically dominating e-commerce, they have all these other business models that are highly profitable. They have advertising on their website. They have the Prime. They have TV. They have music subscriptions. They have all these products that are really edges. You couldn't have the Prime TV or Prime Music if you didn't have all those Prime customers in e-commerce. You couldn't have the marketplace, which is hugely profitable, if they didn't have the e-commerce site. They couldn't have their delivery business, which is becoming profitable because without all the e-commerce delivery. They wouldn't have AWS if it wasn't for the fact that they had to build massive centers for themselves. So not to beat the dead horse, that's what the edges are. So what I try and do with every client is say, what can we add that our relationship allows us to do that a competitor without that relationship cannot do and commoditize easily? That's what I mean by around the edges. Does that make sense?
So this is really taking a perspective of what are the barriers to entrance when you look at your business? What are the defenses that you've set up? And even it looks like the edges is almost like diversification or additional product portfolios. How do you
Can
make
yeah.
how do you make that choice? Like, any company could go in different ways. Is there any metrics or methods to kind of think about how do I set up my defenses?
Common sense. No, not really. At least I haven't discovered any. I think what you have to do is understand the business and then understand what leverage that business is giving you. Um, I'll give you an example. There's a manufacturer or a software developer in California called Brain Corporation. Brain Corporation has developed a stack, a technology stack for indoor autonomy. And as proof of concept, they went after the floor cleaning, and this is industrial floor cleaning business. Industrial floor cleaning requires very expensive equipment, $35,000, $40,000 floor cleaning equipment. And traditionally, you have some guy getting paid, well, now probably 15 plus an hour, driving around in circles up and down the aisles, right? So they created an autonomous floor cleaning stack and licensed that floor cleaning technology to all the big or a number of the big manufacturers, OEMs. But one of their core industries that they deal with are both warehouses and retail.
Hmm.
Retail has an industry in which people pay for robots to go up and down the aisles, collecting shelf level data for shelf level analytics that can be used for dozens of different things, right? Out of stock, price, making sure they're complying on prices, all kinds of things that you want to look at from a retail perspective. So I looked at that and I said, well, if you've got a machine that is going up and down the aisles at about 2.5 to 3 miles per hour, which by the way is a walking speed, which is about the same speed that robots go up and down the aisle, why can't you put a camera
Hmm.
and collect the data on a floor cleaning equipment and eliminate the robot and basically add a whole other service of shelf level data collection onto a floor cleaning robot? The answer is there was no barrier to doing that. So today, BrainCorp not only cleans the floors in most of the Walmarts in the United States and in Mexico, it also collects shelf level data when it goes up and down the aisles. Gave them a natural advantage over the robotics companies and a whole other revenue stream, all because we looked at the core competency, which is going up and down the aisles at less than 3 miles per hour, and said, what else can you layer on top of that core competency? Data collection.
That's amazing. Uh, when we look at a lot of these product improvements, they basically have a time frame on how fast the competitor can catch up. So when
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about hardware, that's going to be a much longer cycle, maybe even a year or more. When we talk about software, a new feature might not create such a large differentiation or amount of time that you need to catch up. Does this mean that it's just a never ever race to outcompete your competitor with new features, new methods to keep them behind, or are there more permanent ways to keep a competitor out?
Well, if you're not innovating, then somebody's going to ultimately eat your lunch. There's no question about that, especially when it comes to things like software. The issue becomes when you're adding stuff that you're adding it, but nobody really wants it,
Hmm.
then it doesn't really have an impact. So there are a lot of factors. I mean, if in a pure perfect world, Google with their Excel product or their spreadsheet product, I see I said Excel, it tells the story, right? Their word processing product, they gave it away for free. That didn't hurt Microsoft because just because you have something you gave it away for free doesn't mean it's free. And by that, what I mean is I pay money every year to Microsoft for Word and for Excel and for the whole suite because the small amount that I pay them to me is worth it because I don't want to spend all this time learning something new. So just adding new features and throwing things on top of it doesn't necessarily guarantee success or that you'll take away a competitor's, you'll start to create a competitive advantage. There are a lot of things that go factors that go into it. You add a feature and I don't really care if that's an important feature. I'm not switching because of it. So it's a hard one. I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard to really know which features make the difference. In most cases, there are more features than people need. and they don't use most of them. There's usually 3 or 4 or 5 things that really matter, and everything else sounded good because the guys from product development came up with it, but not adopted. So that's what you have to be careful about.
Microsoft and Excel is really a great example for both those things that you talked about. On the one hand, I completely agree. There are thousands of features in Excel that nobody uses. But on the other hand, the creation of that lack of cross compatibility between the Microsoft platform to anything else, be it Linux or Apple, really means that you're locked into their platform. So that was one of the ways that all of the big players created that locking into their platform,
Sure.
which is kind of preventing the competitors. Um, as users, we hate it, right? We want to be compatible, but the businesses want to keep us where they are.
They do. I mean, I think a better example than Microsoft is Apple. I mean,
Yes.
Apple does everything in their power to make sure that you can't go out of their ecosystem. And then on the other side, you have all these Apple users who are delighted by it because they don't have to learn new stuff and everything is always seamless. And they switch to a product that's another Apple product and they don't have to learn anything or do anything. I mean, nothing is easier than buying a new Apple phone. I probably, I have an iPhone. The chances of me buying another manufacturer's phone are almost nil because they're hard to move the data. They got me, right? They're going to have to do something really bad for me to switch to a different operating system. Um, that's sort of the way tech works. Yeah.
I want to dive into the marketing and sales buckets for a moment and go down a level. When you look at how things are done in sales and marketing, what are the things that, excuse my language, it kind of piss you off, that you look at it and like, that's wrong. A lot of people in the market are doing it this way and it really shouldn't do that way. What are the kind of low hanging fruits in sales and marketing opportunities in regards to how they're done today?
Well, so the thing about it is that there's no such thing as wrong in the sense that, well, I mean, there is wrong. Obviously, you can give bad messaging and things of that nature. But I mean, in terms of processes, people respond to different things.
Hmm.
Some people are highly responsive to television commercials. Do you ever call a 1-800 number off a TV? Maybe not. But clearly enough people do that 1-800 number advertising makes a lot of sense, right? Some people don't respond to email. Some people only respond to SMS. So what you really have to do is look at every opportunity and say, can I get a return on investment that justifies the expense? Because some things will be better than others, but that doesn't mean that something that is not as good as your best is not worth doing. So what you really need to do is come down to what is the cost per lead that you find in a B2B setting? What is the cost per lead or what is the cost per acquisition that you find acceptable? And you try everything that you can to get that cost per lead or cost per acquisition in the numbers that you want it to be. If it turns out that thing doesn't work, stop doing it. But there's really, I mean, we all have biases. So many years ago, I had a direct marketing ad agency, and one of my clients was Toyota lift truck.
Hmm.
And we did a program where we had these surveys we would send out to lift truck buyers and give them a great free gift. And as a result of free gift, we could get anywhere from 8 to 12% response rates. The better the free gift, the higher the response rate. So I did a program with Toyota where we gave away this really great gift that cost about $12.50. It was
Hmm.
this really cool model of a lift truck that the kind of thing you'd want to put on your desk if you work in a factory and you run distribution. And it got about a 17% response rate. And as a result of that, we were way over budget. Our cost per lead was half of what it was supposed to be. The
Hmm.
dealers, because it was a dealer program, absolutely loved it. The number of leads went through the roof, but our budget was X,
And
and
when you
we
say budget, you mean budget for the gift?
by Toyota's budget that they gave us for the program. We went
Hmm.
over the budget by like 25 or 30% because we gave out so many more of these
Right.
free gifts to get the leads.
Out
And
of
they were great.
curiosity.
I mean, these were surveys where people were giving you every bit of information that a salesperson
Hmm.
would need to sell a lift truck. When they intended to buy, the competition, what they had, and everything. It was a 26 question survey. It was fantastic.
When you averaged out the cost per lead that was half plus the cost of the gift, what did that look like? Was it worth
No,
it or not?
averaging out with the cost of the gift, we were at half of what the budget was.
Oh, okay. So then then the budget shouldn't matter at that stage.
You would think, except that the CEO at the time hated direct mail, and he came in and he fired me because I went over budget. Because he personally said he hates direct mail.
That feels short-sighted.
So what I'm saying to you is that what pisses me off, because you were looking for that, are
Mm,
people that allow their own biases
mm,
to actually dictate what they do instead of understanding that they are just one consumer with one set of beliefs. And there are a whole bunch of other consumers who believe otherwise. I personally hate social media,
right.
right? I can't stand Facebook. I hate what they're doing. But as much as I hate it, I recognize that for some of the programs that I'm doing, social media matters and it's worth doing. My bias would say don't do it. But then I would be doing a disservice to the marketing that I'm trying to do because there are obviously a billion or so people that like what's going on Facebook, right? So that's the key. That's what pisses me off, Harry. People that just allow their own bias to dictate the terms.
I
Stupid.
appreciate it. We talk a lot about social psychology, and the one that you're talking about here specifically is called egocentric bias. It's the assumption that everybody else sees the world the same way that we do. And I want to say that I learned this at a very early age, but I really didn't. It took me a while to figure out what you're just saying. So I deeply appreciate it. Um, what are the kind of unexpected things that, maybe from your own biases where you're like, well, this is not going to work, but it surprised you and it was knocked out of the park?
I go into almost every test thinking that it will work. So I will
Okay.
tell you quite honestly, if I don't think it's going to work, I probably wouldn't do it. But I'm an optimist by trade, so I rarely have done things that um, that I thought didn't work. I was usually disappointed when they didn't because I believed almost everything will work. Right? If I've thought about it and worked on it and put my sweat equity into it, I think it's going to work. I will tell you the one that early in my career that kind of blew me away is when I first started my direct marketing ad agency and had no clients and no money. A guy came to me who had a private prison. And it turned out this is in California. It's a long time ago. And basically, if you got busted for a DUI or some minor things, you could actually apply to go to a halfway house
Hmm.
instead of going to the county jail.
Hmm.
But you had to ask for it and you had to be willing to pay for it. It was only 30 or 40 bucks a day, but you had to be willing to pay and you had to ask for it. And the guy was getting absolutely no traction.
Hmm.
So he came to me and he had a budget, which at the time was like $3,000 or $4,000. Now this is almost 30 years ago. So it was, it
Like
wasn't meaningful money,
$10,000. Yeah.
but you could actually do something with it. And I said to him, I really don't know what I can do to get this demand built up from lawyers. So why don't, because there wasn't enough money to go after the lawyers, because the lawyer had to ask, tell his client and ask for it.
Yeah.
But I said, look, here's what I can do. I had a guy that owned a TV, a camera. We could shoot a really cheap TV commercial and buy direct response TV at late at night that basically would go out to people and say, if you've been arrested for a DUI, don't want to spend time in county jail, ask your lawyer about this. And we basically did an ask your lawyer program. And I
Hmm.
told them, I don't think you're going to get a lot of phone calls, but I do know you'll get a lot of publicity,
Hmm.
right? We'll do PR campaign about the first private prison in America to advertise. So we shot this commercial. I'm the guy getting arrested. We got some footage from Sing Sing of the cell door slamming shut. Had a voiceover with a guy who had a really resonating voice saying, "If you've been arrested," and we did this 60-second commercial that cost all of $500 to make. I think I
Wow.
marked it up to 750 so I could make a profit. And then we bought $10 or $15 spots on late night TV in Los Angeles, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, when nobody's supposed to be watching, but people are, and did a quick PR release saying that we were the first private prison to ever advertise in America. So we got picked up by all the ton of newspapers. At the time, PBS did a segment on us. I mean, we got all this
Oh,
free
wow.
publicity. But the thing that blew me away, Ari, were the amount of phone calls that we got from people who saw the commercial who wanted to go to a private prison instead of going to county jail. And we filled up 3 facilities in about 9 months, and we ran that commercial for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
That one surprised me because I just thought the TV would do nothing other than get us the free publicity. It turned out the TV was a complete home run in terms of getting people to call and get lawyers to ask judges to put people into our facilities. That one
Was,
blew me away.
was there anything special about the fact that it was like very late night ads? Was
Yeah,
that
people
like,
that drink too much are up late at night.
Was that it? Was that intentional? I was like, well, we can't afford, prime time. How did that come?
Yeah, no, it was intentional in the sense that one, we couldn't afford anything better, but it was
Yeah,
intentional in the sense we figured if people are in trouble, they're the people that are staying up late at night watching movies, right? Or watching late night TV.
can't
They
sleep.
wouldn't, it's obviously not daytime TV product. And you certainly couldn't do prime time. So back then, and I'm sure it's cheap now too. Well, now TV's changed, right? It's not linear anymore or CTV. But back then, you could buy that time for almost nothing. $15 a spot, $25 a spot. It was really cheap.
Ironically, that's kind of come back today, but that's in a certain way with yeah, but that's a whole different discussion.
Right.
Um,
Well, it's why you have people today have a bias against direct mail, which has become a little
right.
too expensive. But the fact of the matter is, now's a great time to do direct mail because there's not much in the mailbox.
Yeah.
You're not competing with 40 other pieces of mail.
Yeah.
So,
It's exactly what you said, right? I mean, I think some of the direct mail is just criminal, right? The ones that it looks like it's a message from your bank and then it's an ad for a loan or something. So it creates a huge negative bias for me. But as you said, I mean, it's converting. It's not converting at 20%, but it's converting at 3, 4, 5%, sometimes only 1%. If that's good enough to justify the price, people are going to do it. So
I hate to tell you, Ari, but check mailings are really, really work well.
oh my lord. I
We used to do a mailing where we would make it look like it was a FedEx envelope. It didn't say FedEx, but it would
Yeah,
look like FedEx.
yeah.
Those did really well. I mean, certain things did really well, and you look at it and say, "Boy, I hate that," but they work.
Do companies get backlash for that, or they're like, "Oh, you're trying to confuse me? No way in hell I will ever use you."
Yeah, but not enough of those to outweigh the people that say, "Boy, I think I'll call this company because it looked important."
Uh,
Yeah,
I have mixed
I mean,
feelings
there's a
about
certain
that.
percentage of people that are going to get pissed off whatever you send them. It doesn't really matter.
Uh,
Right? They just don't want to get it.
Fair enough. Steve, what an absolute delight! This was a lot of fun. We have only one, scripted question in this show, and it's a difficult one because it's a little bit private. If I had to ask you, going back to 20-something-year-old Steve, what would you advise to him?
So I probably would not be giving him particularly good advice. I'll tell you that.
Why is that? That's curious.
Because I've always sort of been a go with the flow kind of person. This sort of went that way, so I think I'll go that way. What I will tell you though is at the end of the day, the advice I would have given is the biggest currency you'll have as you get older are the connections that you make and
Hmm.
the relationships that you build. And that if you understand the value of these relationships, you'll be more successful than those people who don't. And that building a very big network is the key to success in business over time. I think that would be the first advice I would give. The other advice, by quite frankly, Ari, is, and I've to best of my ability followed it. If you really love what you're doing, it's not work. Find things that you love doing so that you don't have to work. People say, "How hard do you work?" I go, "The guy that digs ditches, that's work. What I do, that's not working." And then when it feels like working, look for another job.
Steve, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate
Oh,
you.
my pleasure.